Hello everyone and welcome to SIG Autoscaling meeting for Monday the 17th of July 2023. We do have a few items on the agenda. Kevin, a couple of items from you to start with.
Yeah, hey, can you hear us?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So first one, I created an issue for that. I wanted to see here if there's any concerns or suggestions on like how we would do that. But I noticed that there is no way of setting the vertical pod autoscaler plus autoscale like area labels for non-maintainers of the repository. And I think it might be useful for people creating tasks or issues. And yeah, just a heads up and seeing if there's any feedback on that, or if we can try and do that.
Yeah, I think that's
and
definitely.
The second one, we had a discussion. Add-on resizer is a little confusing as it's like released from the 1.8 branch, and I'd be interested in moving it back to the master branch, but there's a very old version there, and I wanted to check in this forum if anybody knows more history, or like if that master version is still used, or like it hasn't been updated in forever. If there's any concerns of replacing that with 1.8 and moving the release to the master branch to also trigger automation again, because 1.8 doesn't auto trigger automation for pull requests. And I wanted to see if anybody here knows the history, or like, is there a reason to keep the current one around? It has a lot of vulnerabilities as well, I think.
Yeah, so I tried to write about this on the issue. Like, I think there was a plan to like change how add-on resizer works, but the plan didn't work out, and like all places I could check are still using 1.8. So I think like we probably should go back to doing whatever 1.8 is doing. I'm not sure how to version that, because when we were changing from 1.8 to what's currently master, we changed major version. So like we might need to do something with versioning there, and I'm not sure what to do when you want to go back to like what the previous version was doing. Yeah, like I think we should, like, unless we find someone who's actually using what's the master version from master, like probably should go back to 9.8.
It's being the version 2 point something was being published to registry registry.case.io, right?
That's the old one, right?
Or sorry, whatever the new registry is. I can't remember off the top of my head. If so, we should be able to. We might need to ask infra, but I think we should be able to get usage stats of like and see if people are actually pulling those images, and if so, well, at least how many image pulls. I don't know if we'd be able to get as granular as sort of IP address.
But even if they're pulling it, they would be pulling a like very outdated version. They should technically not be running it. It has like tons of security vulnerabilities, I think, and it's built on like old Golang versions. Like they could still pull the old image if they rely on it, but if we update, it might behave differently. And the question is, if we like, let's say we move 1.8 to then 3.0, that should still be safe, right? But people relying on this image right now are in danger anyways. So we should somehow figure out how many that are.
Yeah, I think it's even if there are, or even if there aren't people using it, we should still follow deprecation policies, and send out announcements as soon as possible that I think the right move does feel to me like to jump, effectively use 1.8 as the base and jump up to 3, and then just do comms as early as possible of like you should move.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think that's all I have. Thanks.
Awesome, thanks. Suraj is not able to join this week. Skip over. Next up is Benjamin. And I think we did discuss this briefly last week. Anyone? Looks like there's now some merge conflicts again, unfortunately. Are you able to give the? Where are we? I suppose until we've got a rebase again, it's not worth reviewing again, I guess. Yeah, because Bartek, you previously reviewed it, right?
Yeah, I think so, but I'm not sure about this specific one.
Yeah, I think it'll need a rebase before it's worth looking at again. Anyway, okay, cool. In that case, Marco.
Yeah, thanks. So the first item is about a feature that I tried to get merged into the VPA for quite a while. That is adjusting the eviction, or like it's about controlling the eviction behavior based on like if VPA is scaling up or down. And when we started talking more seriously about in-place resource edits, the question was brought up, like, should this control also be applied to in-place resource edits? And I think Joachim opened PR, which essentially adjusts the enhancement proposal with support for in-place resource edits. And then at some point, I unfortunately took a while responding to the discussion, so it seems like this got stuck somehow. I did respond like 2 weeks ago or something, and then so I guess it's back to Joachim and Carol maybe taking a second look. So the summary of my point of view is I vote for not extending this to in-place resource edits, but making it about evictions only. And like if people have other opinions, then let me know, and let's see how to continue this. But for now, like the initial reasoning why we wanted to have this feature doesn't necessarily apply to in-place resource edits very well.
So I will take a look and respond to on the PR later this week. I was a bit worried about the scenario that you say you are not worried about. Like we have a pod that is working, we scale it down in place, and then we want to resize it back to the outside, but we can't do that because something else got scheduled. But yeah, I don't think I want to block too long on this. I will write on the PR later this week.
Yeah, I mean, like that scenario is a very special one. I don't have clear indication like if that really will become a problem or not. Just like by looking at the pure utilization numbers that I have at hand in like the clusters I can get access to, don't seem to indicate like that this will be a huge problem. But I mean, this might be different in like other people's clusters. But yeah, okay. We can, yeah.
I will try to like I will write something this week, and hopefully
Awesome.
we'll get this like resolved quickly.
Thanks. Yeah, and the next point on the agenda is also mine. So like in the past 1 or 2 weeks, I've had multiple discussions about where people were asking or suggesting having an alternative for VPA support besides the status.selector from the scale subresource. Essentially, they were proposing something that has been there in VPA v1 beta 1, I guess, namely manually specifying a label selector. I've provided like a few links to the example discussions that were there, and people were coming from all sorts of different directions. I think it's basically maybe 2 different scenarios or cases. Like one is CRD authors are not really aware or didn't care that they need the scale sub-resource, including this optional label selector field. Unfortunately, like people don't have to provide this when implementing the scale sub-resource. And there's a number of like custom resource definitions that just don't provide this field. And then users get back to them saying like, hey, I want to use autoscaling. And they say, well, you can. No, I can't. And like this is all a back and forth where you have to argue with authors of CRDs. And the second one was actually somebody on Slack asking for, hey, can I scale individual pods? Like without any controllers managing those pods. And at first I was kind of curious, like if this is just a test scenario, but they pointed me to Airflow, which I don't have any experience with. But apparently, like from a very rough look, it seems that this creates pods, right? It doesn't create a replica set with like a single replica using a pod template or anything. It just creates a pod. It doesn't use jobs, which is very weird, at least to me, from having taken a brief look. But also like here, things wouldn't work. Yeah, and I guess like my question is, what's our standpoint on this? I've done a very small PR to the documentation of the scale sub-resource where it only said like, well, you have to do this if you want to have horizontal scaling. And turns out you also need to do this if you need vertical scaling. And like, do we just point people towards that documentation and say like, well, it's documented, right? Just do the thing and then it works. Or like, do we want to like do something that we at some point in time intentionally removed from the VPA, like manual label selectors? Do we want to bring this back or like provide anything else? Yeah, sorry, long talk. Now open to you.
Like I definitely want to take a look at what the discussions that we had back when we made the change, because, but I don't remember right off the bat what was the reason.
So I have a small question here. If we, like, I don't have enough context to have any opinion here, but I think scale sub-resource is also like you can use it with HPA obviously, and then there is the balancer, which is also being developed by SIG. It feels like maybe whatever we decide to go with. By the way, balancer, as I understand, also was based on scale sub-resource. So it feels like some consistency would be nice. So like whatever decision we go with, maybe it would make sense to do the same for all the projects in the SIG.
I think the a bit more specific as well. The Airflow one is interesting. I'd be sort of intrigued with for a bit more information on there, because my experience of Airflow has generally been sort of within an AWS environment, and effectively, I think there's a lot of flexibility in how they can create things. So I think it may just be that they can achieve the same thing, but creating a replica set with a single pod by using a different way to launch these single pods, and therefore be able to use it. Yeah, but I think to the more general point, I think I agree with Maciek that I think if we can achieve consistency across the SIG, I think that might help to remove some confusion.
Yeah, so currently it is kind of consistent, right? Everybody, like all the projects require the scale sub-resource and the selector field to be implemented, and then you can use HPA, you can use VPA, and then once it's released, you can also use the balancer.
I think my point was that like the consistency is good. So if we want to make the change, it would be nice to make it across features. I think it's definitely going to be, maybe not definitely, I think it will be harder with HPA sort of because of being Kubernetes API in the main repo and so on, but maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong on this. But it would be nice if we make such change to make it across the board and not just for VPA.
Yeah, I think this might have been one of the main arguments back when VPA switched back from like manual label selector to using the scale sub-resource and saying like, hey, that makes it consistent with HPA. But yeah, okay. I mean, I'm fine with just pointing people to documentation and saying like, I see that you're trying to argue, but I mean, this is basically how it is, how like autoscaling works, and you like feel free to propose a different way, but currently this is how it works.
Is it maybe then that we've just got a gap in documentation for authors of CRDs to point them to and say, here's if you implement this optional field, here's this extra benefits you get. If you don't, then your users aren't going to be able to make use of the following features.
Yeah, that's what I thought, and therefore I did the PR to like also add VPA into the documentation for that scale sub-resource field. So I guess maybe for now that's okay. Okay, like if nobody's screaming now, like yeah, sure, I like always wanted to bring back manual label selectors, then I guess that's also fine. Okay, yeah, thanks.
I have one topic which I did not add to the agenda. I'm planning to do the patch releases for Cluster Autoscaler next week. So standard request to, if you have anything that needs to be backported, or if you know of such things that are not backported yet, please tag them to the issue. Yeah, thanks.
And that's back to 124, right?
Yes, back to 124.
Brilliant. Thanks. Cool. Anything else from anyone else? Robert, anything from you?
All set. I was just lurking today.
Okay, go. No worries. Jesse.
Sorry about that. Sorry. Nothing for me.
No worries. Sergey. I shall take silence. So,
yeah, sorry, nothing for me.
Go. No worries. In that case, thanks very much, everyone, for attending, and see you all next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.